So now let's get to two hard hypotheticals. The House has passed the $15 minimum wage after progressives have pushed for it for a long time. So, but we're thrilled. Great. Credit where credit is due. So the Democrats control the House now. They passed the $15 minimum wage. Initially, Democratic leadership was opposed to it, but now they're on the right side. But if let's say this is the two hypotheticals. One is that Biden wins, with Democrats still have the House, but Mitch McConnell and the Republicans still have the Senate. At that point, Dolores, what do you do if the Republicans go, no, we're just not going to give you the $15 minimum wage? And look, in my experience, usually Nancy Pelosi then goes, okay, great, let's move on. Okay, so then what do we do?
Well, that's a terrible picture, because that's kind of the situation that we're in right now, because the HEROES Act is in negotiating right now, where the House of Representatives has passed a $3 trillion bill to help people out in this crisis. And McConnell and Trump are holding, and they're refusing to really negotiate to get the money that people really need right now during this pandemic. So the question you're asking me is, I think my only answer is that right now we've got to do as much as we can to make sure that scenario that you are painting doesn't play out. To remember that it's not only about the presidency, but it's also about the Senate. It's also about the Congress of the United States of America. So we can't think of just in this election cycle that we're just going to think about who do we elect as president, but also who do we elect to our Senate seats and to our House seats and even to our local seats. So. When we talk about working people, and I have to say, when I think about people getting $15 an hour, that always kind of makes me a little angry, because we know that if our wages would have kept up with the cost of living in the United States of America, the minimum wage should be $30 an hour. And that should have been several years ago, $30 an hour. Because people cannot live on $15 an hour anymore. People have to work 2 jobs to be able to just keep up with the cost of living. So, and the other thing too, and maybe this is something that we can make people understand, that people are now understanding that racism stemmed from slavery and conquest. This is where racism began. And when we think about working and the way working people are treated, that it also came from slavery, where they wanted people to work for nothing. And basically that's what so many of these giant organizations, if we take these, they brag about the jillions of dollars like Amazon, all of the money that they make, but they won't even give their workers a living wage. And so at some point, I think we tie the two together, that people will begin to understand that workers and their organizations, labor unions, need to be respected also.
So, Derrick, I know NAACP is nonpartisan, so let's take a nonpartisan point of view on this. Let's say it's all Democrats, Senate, House, and the White House, and they still don't pass, whether it's $15 an hour or anything that we care about in terms of policy, systemic reform of police. What do we do then if the Democrats still don't take action? Because it's not like it hasn't happened before, where the Democrats controlled everything, and we still have systemic racism. We still have a lot of the ailments that plagued us for decades.
So let's be clear. Political parties are nothing more than vehicles for agenda. And for progressive-minded individuals who care about the health and welfare of society, we must demand and push regardless of the outcome of the election. But before we get to an outcome of the election, we must demand and push to make sure we turn out to vote so our voices can be heard at the ballot box, and we have a set of policymakers who walk into office with a value proposition that we all hold dear. Are we caring for our elderly so they can be healthy? Are we preparing our young people for a bright future? And do we protect the rights of those who are disadvantaged? That's a value proposition that we must drive home and fight like hell for in November. And when the ballot box closes on November and we're successful, we still got to continue the fight because the election is necessary, but it's not sufficient for the policy change we must see. What's sufficient is the policy change itself and the implementation of the policy and the enforcement of the policy. So freedom is a constant struggle. It's not a one-time hit. It's not a transaction. It's an ongoing process. And veterans of civil rights movement, veterans of the farm workers movement, no, it's an ongoing fight. And for every step forward, there will be attempts to move us back 3 steps, but we must keep pushing keep pushing ahead.
So Derrick, on that, let's end on what the future looks like, right? So I think that when people look back, we've talked about this on the show recently, when historians look back, they will say that the slavery era lasted longer than just the end of slavery. So there was a transition. There was a transition out of slavery. So Jim Crow is obvious, but I think that we're still in the middle of that transition where African Americans in this country are clearly being treated differently. I mean, every single day on the show, there's a different story. Just yesterday, Santa Clarita, people call in a call, 2 black kids getting accosted, the cops come and put their guns to the black kids who are the victims. So, and I can give you 1,000 other examples, and you can give me 2,000 other examples. So what's your sense of, for God's sake, when do we end this transition?
Right, understand that the institution of slavery was a period in time. The institution of segregation is a period in time. The institution of redlining and structural racism is a period in time. The real issue is how people are being exploited for their labor and their potentials being suffocated. It is our job as individuals, as communities, to prevent, stop, and advance a new narrative. Race is a social construct. Italians were not considered white until it became politically acceptable to see them as white. Same for the Jewish community, same for the Albanian community. What we must do as citizens is push for a new value propositions that all of us are human beings who should be created equally, and we define equal based on a number of factors, not one factor, not based on a transaction of one election, but it's a value proposition that we must demand and force others to live up to.
And Dolores, similar question to you, but on the issue of labor. And as Derrick pointed out, obviously they're intertwined. And so right now, I think workers are in a disastrous state. We're talking about how $15 isn't enough. Right now, the current federal minimum wage is $7.25. That's $15,000 a year if you work a full-time job. It's unbelievable. And corporate power is now larger than it has ever been. And they give what I call bribes, what the rest of the media calls campaign contributions to politicians, and honestly own most of them. So it's Jesus. As you look at that, when and how do we get past that? Are you optimistic? And if so, how do we break this stranglehold they've got on us?
Well, I think that and this is one area that we can be hopeful in. I know that Joe Biden is a supporter of labor movements, and just replacing people on the National Labor Relations Board, and then if we can get that down to the state level, I think we can see a resurgence of the labor movement, because right now they are stymied by so many laws that really prevent them from organizing. Even just a card check, if people can just sign a card and say, I want my union to represent me, which they have made that, they can't get that past the Congress or even on the state level. That would really help a lot. And so I think that's one area that we can be hopeful in. But I think that in terms of the bigger picture, and then we have to think about the kind of jobs that need to be created, the green jobs that need to be created, and to make sure some of those green jobs are actually good paying jobs, not like minimum wage jobs to make solar panels. They've got to be much bigger than that. So I think that is one area that hopefully we can see some change. But as Derrick said earlier, we can't stop regardless of what happens at the election. We've got to keep pushing and protesting and moving to make sure that some of these things happen. Because this is one opportunity that we have with this election to try to change the administration here in the United States of America and try to make some of these really, really major changes that need to be made. And adding one more, to make sure that our educational system, that we can start teaching the real history of the United States of America, so white folk will know who built the country, okay? It was African slaves and Native Americans and immigrants that came from all of these countries that our president degrades, built the United States of America. So we can start attacking the white privilege and white supremacy that exists in our country.
Right, and the one other group that built this country is the other group that he attacks, the Chinese.
And the Filipinos.
That's right. That's right.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.